Hello everyone and welcome to a new tutorial. This week we're gonna be recreating the Spear of Mars ability from Dota 2. Oh shit!
There's nowhere to run!
First things first, we gotta set up our test scene with a plane and a checker material. I'm going to quickly assemble a little map with 4 walls and a couple of pillars. For the player, I will import a very basic first-person controller script I have created and attach it to this sphere. Let's see what it looks like right now. Okay, our test scene looks pretty good. You don't have to do this part, of course. You can just use whatever scene from your project you wish. I just needed something to play around on. Okay, we'll begin by creating an empty game object called Spear and give it a new C# script called Spear of Mars or whatever name you wish, and also give it a box collider. For the spear visuals, we will create a capsule, then scale it down a bit and make it look more like a spear. Make it a child of our spear game object and reset its location. We need to move the box collider to the tip of our capsule and scale it down to try and fit it nicely on there. Make sure you check its trigger. On to particles. Create a new particle system, set start speed to random between 1 and 2. Start size to random between 0.3 and 0.6. For start color, select bloody red. Change simulation space to world and increase simulation speed to 2. Gravity to 0.1. Scroll down to size over lifetime and select a curve going down. Enable collisions and change the type to world. Set the bounces to 0 and dampen to 1 so that it sticks to the ground. Make this particle system a child of our spear and reset its position and move it closer to the tip of our spear. Rotate it so that the particles shoot down the spear. Under shape settings, lower its shape to make it fit the spear a bit better. You can see they are not flying away from it. That is because they are currently colliding with things. One thing we forgot to do was remove the collider from the capsule. If we go back, you can see it is still colliding with something, that being the player, and we don't want this. Go down to collision settings and under collides with, choose whatever layer you want. In my case, I wanted to collide with the environment, so I'll choose environment. You can always create a new layer for it. I will select my map real quick and change its layer to environment. You can see they're still colliding with something. That something is the ground. So move it up and yep, looking good. You can always change the radius scale of our particles here. I think I will leave it at 0.5. Rename this particle system to heat effects. Uncheck looping and under emission settings, set the rate over time to 0 and enable a burst of 30 particles. Cool. Duplicate this particle system and rename it to impact effects. Set the speed to 2 and 3, so that is a bit faster. Under emission settings, set its burst particles to 60 and rate over time to 10. Select both particle systems and disable them, then drag the spear game object into your projects folder to create a prefab. You can just delete it from your scene now. It's time to begin coding. Open up your spear script. First thing we will do in here is set up some variables. A float to hold our movement speed, rotation speed, how far it will travel before destroying itself, the duration it will be thrusted in the walls, how far it will thrust into enemies before taking them with it, a boolean to allow movement on the y-axis of the enemies, and 2 string arrays that will control what this spear affects. We also need a transform variable to hold whatever enemy we collided with, 2 booleans that will act as our state controls, 2 vector trees to calculate distance we traveled, and 3 game objects. One to move the enemy with our spear and 2 other ones to hold our particle effects. Under start, we will assign the spawn position to be this transform's position and then find both of our particles we created. All done with start. Under update, the first thing we will do is check if we have not impacted Then inside here we will move the spear forward using movement speed variable. Store the distance between the impact position and our thrust distance variable so that we can check if it is bigger, and also if we have assigned the enemy lock holder game object. If all this is true, then we set the enemy lock holder parent to be the spear so that it follows it. Now we do something very similar, but we calculate the distance we have traveled by using the spawn position variable instead and checking our range, then destroying ourselves. You will also re-enable the enemy script here so that the enemy can move again. I will show you what I mean in a second. Now if we have assigned the enemy variable, we create a temporary variable that holds the enemy lock holder game object's position. And here we also check if yLock is true, and if it is, then we set this variable's y value to be the enemy's y position. That way, it won't move upwards when it is being dragged by the spear. If we do not have an enemy, we have to spin the spear. So we do that using our rotation speed. Cool. If we have impacted, then we lower the duration variable. This is how long the enemy will be thrusted in the wall. If this value reaches 0, we destroy the spear and also enable the enemy script so that it can move again. But for me, to do that, I need an enemy script, right? Let me go back to Unity and quickly import an enemy script that all it does is move the enemy in a random direction every now and then. Now back in my script, I will use the enemy variable to get the enemy wander script and enable it. Back up here, if we have assigned the enemy variable, and if we have, then we enable the enemy script. Alright, all done with update. On to onTrigger enter. First we check if we have not impacted, and inside here we also check if we do not have an enemy and whatever we collided with contains the tag we assigned in the inspector. Here we assign our enemy lock holder by creating a new game object, and I'm going to name it something like enemy position holder. Set its position to be the position of whatever we collided with and assign the enemy variable to this as well. Set the impact pose to be the current position of the spear so that we can calculate the thrust distance. Set hasEnemy to true to change the state. Enable our hit effects, and I'm going to go up here and copy this line of code and just paste it here. But instead of enabling it, we disable it so that the enemy stops moving. Else if we do have excuse me, sorry about that, my cat just walked into the fucking microphone. If we do have an enemy and it contains the impact tag, we enable the impact effect and unparent the enemy lock holder game object. Lastly, we set hasImpacted to true to change the states. If that contains is giving you errors, make sure you have system.link up here. Let's take a quick glimpse at how I am creating the sphere inside my controller script. If you've ever coded a bullet, this will look very familiar to you. All I'm doing is creating the spear prefab in front of the camera using the camera's current rotation. Back in Unity, open up our spear prefab, and for onTrigger enter to work properly, we have to add a rigid body. Disable use gravity and enable is kinematic. Okay, for these values I will do 10 for movement speed and rotation speed. This needs to be very high value, but we won't be able to see it because the capsule is perfectly rounded, so I'm just going to quickly add a box and scale it down to give it kind of like a blade. Okay, now we will be able to see it rotate. For range, I will do 10. No, make it 15 actually. Duration to 3 seconds, thrust distance to 1. yLock, I will leave it false for now. For enemy tags to check, I will of course do enemy, and for impact tags to check, I will do untag for now. Of course, you should change this if you have a lot of untagged game objects. We need some enemies to test this on, so I will quickly set up a couple of enemies around the map, assign the spear prefab to my player controller and hit play. It disappeared because its range value is too low, but you can see the enemy is being dragged nicely with the spear. Awesome, it's all working as intended. I'm going to change some of the values a bit and enable white lock so you can see how this works out. Great, the enemy's Y position is not moving with the spear. Now go customize it to look however you like. Here is mine. If you want this spear model and all project files, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I have all the files available there, including some from other projects and many more to come. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe, you know how it goes. Have a good one, bye bye.